Hey there, YouTube. It's Kurt here. Today we're going to take a look at budget, yes, budget Drytron. So what we're going to do to make this a more budget version of Drytron, even though the cards aren't super expensive to begin with, we're going to replace the Drytron Nova. Nova is the expensive card in the deck, with that one up to $40 per copy. But the replacement that we're going to use for this card, even though this is the most popular searcher off of Drytron Fafnir, we're going to replace that with 3 copies of Where Art Thou and 3 copies of Jack in the Hand. So these pretty much get any Drytron that you need as long as you draw a Drytron, and you don't always have to reveal information to your opponent, so you can kind of work around. Obviously, Nova is superior to these cards because it's any one Drytron of your selection special summoned. Obviously, that is going to be superior in most instances, but these searchers do very well in replacement for that as a budget option. In most instances, it doesn't matter, and you can play around that restriction. And this is also perfect for the local level, because like I love bringing any build that costs like less than $100 to locals. That makes me super happy, and it makes me lifts that restriction. I don't want anybody to basically not be able to play the deck that I'm playing. If you have like $50 for Yu-Gi-Oh, so do I. So you have really. Every deck costs at least like $50. I'll just pretty much say that. You can make some exceptions, but like there's barriers to none. That's like the only cheap thing you can play, and like say, oh, I have no other money. But anyway, so we have the budget Drytron, and obviously the other expensive cards might be the Ritual Spell and the Ritual Monster comparatively to all the other cards. And we also have the Herald cards, which also can be a little bit pricey. But really, it's just Orange Light. That's like $5 or $6. And maybe I don't know what Natasha's sitting at, but it's probably not too expensive. But anyway, so obviously, I'll go over some combos with you here. There's really not much else changed about the deck. Really, I'm throwing in my own tech. I just like playing Relinquished. It's not the most optimal build, but it is kind of cute. And honestly, the follow-ups that you get with like this small Relinquished package can be really funny and hilarious. And also, they can really, really help to close out games in ways that your Drytron cards sometimes have trouble with. But obviously, this deck is very toolboxy. You can pretty much throw anything in the extra deck that you need to in terms of like link monsters, and that's the advantage that Drytron has. I love this deck. It has a pretty high ceiling. It tends to be pretty interactive. I don't like that a lot of times it is Vanity's Turbo, but I do like the aspect of like it's better than dealing with something like VFD because there are answers to it, and at least you have to put in the work for protection, like setting up like a Herald of the Purple Light, things of that nature. So without further ado, I'll get into some replays here, and hopefully you guys have a lot of fun playing Drytron. I think this deck is a lot of fun. It has its obvious weaknesses in that it does lose to Droll and Lockbird. It can lose to the most basic Ash Blossom. It does dodge a lot of other hand traps, although. But that's what I love about this deck. It has its weaknesses. I think the Drytron cards are actually really well designed. They actually come back with retroactive restrictions. Like, other cards don't have retroactive restrictions. I think that's why they're unfair. Like the Dogmatica cards, it doesn't matter what you do to turn. If you end on activating the Dogmatica cards, you can do that at the end of like a full board or doing whatever other shenanigans you can do, and there's no retroactive restrictions. The Drytron cards say during the turn you do this, you cannot do this thing. So that covers the entire turn. And I think card design like that is extremely, extremely fair, and brings and also forces you to be creative in other ways, and it is great for making a deck linear instead of just boring and very linear like we've seen with other card designs of the past year, like Eldritch and Dogmatica. And so that's one thing I'm really, really appreciative for. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into some replays, and we'll show you how to potentially play around some things here. So if you open up Jack in the Hand, what you probably want to do, you definitely want to open like at least 2 ways to get to a Drytron monster. So at least 2 Drytron monsters essentially in your hand to get your combo going. If you open one, basically that's a brick. But if you open one and you open Jack in the hand, what you want to do is probably you don't want to reveal the one that you have in your hand. So the one that you have in your hand, obviously you keep it there. And then you activate Jack in the hand, and you give your opponent the option of the 3 other ones. Or even like throw in the copy of the single one to kind of bluff them out. But most of the time you do want alpha. So if your opponent's smart, they'll probably pick alpha. That's probably the best one that you have. But if you don't, even if you don't get alpha, there's a lot of follow-ups that you can do with other cards. Zeta, Zeta is great on turn 1 because that's what you need to get your spell card. But after you get your spell card, basically it's kind of dead in the graveyard after that. But then Gamma and Delta. Delta might be a great option if they steal your alpha. Delta can be a really good option if you need to draw into something. That's what I found personally. So obviously, like, you do want to either open alpha or find a way to get to alpha. Cause that's where Art Thou is really good. Because if you open up Where Art Thou instead of with any other of the Drytron monsters, then you can use that, and that'll be an automatic way to get alpha. So yes, this does have a weakness. It's not exactly like Nofa, but it can be a very decent replacement and be very, very competitive, at least at the local level. So yeah, most of the time you do your combo here. Obviously, you do want to max out your Ben 10 as much as possible. Like, as many Drytron monsters, that's as many Ben 10 as what you want to attribute in one turn. So yeah, 2 Drytron monsters, use Ben 10 twice, and then if you can, get your vanities. Then you use your ritual spell to get back Benton on the field, then tribute summon your vanities, and then you get to trigger Ben 10 for a 3rd time, and then Ben 10 adds you like maybe a Herald, or if you're going anti-meta, maybe Picolantia. It's really very basic from there, but really the cute areas is like where you're able to follow up. And do I want to make this in this situation, or do I want to make this in this situation? What am I playing against? So a lot of times you do have to carefully map out which effects you use in order, because if you reduce your monster's attack, you may not be able to use it to ritual summon like Herald of Ultimateness, things of that nature. So you do need to be careful in what order you're activating effects and what you want to play around. So there's a lot of thought that goes into piloting this deck, but I love it overall, and that's what I love decks that require brain cells. I say that even though I do play Gren Maju. I love the beatstick aspect of Gren Maju, but I love decks like this. The only reason I love Gren Maju, I love 2 types of decks. I love decks that are anti-meta. That's one. That's where I play like Stun Gren Maju. And it's really, really effective, and it's funny when meta just loses to it. But I also love decks that are very toolboxy and have very creative play lines. And I think the difference here is like people say Sky Striker is very toolboxy. At one point it was, but it's just gotten extremely linear. It's like there's obviously every deck does want to recur, but you're not constantly weighing resources about what you want to get to. It's all that deck is like all a matter of, okay, what do I have? What do I need? Whereas a deck like Drytron, the only linear part is like how often you're summoning vanities, but everything around that particular play can take a wild amount of imagination to kind of get through. So that's all I got for today, guys. Peace.